Welcome. We come to you live with some breaking news on the topic of space exploration. Continuously competitive rival, the Soviet Union, has caught us, the United States, off guard with a believed to be classified satellite launch. We're being told that this satellite was known as the Sputnik 1 by Soviets and is currently in the Earth's orbit. But we will get more into that after the intro. My name is James, and this is Channel 187 News. Most of our viewers sitting at home may know about our attempts to finish testing on our contribution to the International Geophysical Year, or IGY for short, and that contribution would be the Vanguard. At this current time, the Vanguard needs roughly only 2 more months of testing before official launch. Because of this fact, the United States had their hopes up for winning the race to launch the first satellite into orbit. But sadly, the Soviet Union today has surprised the United States with the launch of their very own satellite, the Sputnik 1. You know what I really like? Further elaborations on topics. So we did just that. We're going to be going to our interviewer and science correspondent, Henry Wallison, as he hits up an interview with a local U.S. student. On to you, Henry.
James, I'm here with bystander Nolan Aiken, and I would like to ask you some questions about the following events that has been happening in the USSR. Are you familiar with the launching of Sputnik?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Okay, well, what do you think about the sort of conflicts, the rising tensions between the USSR and the United States?
All I've heard is that the U.S. government is a little mad that they launched it without them knowing because the U.S. wanted to have their first satellite in space.
Do you know about any U.S. attempts to launch a satellite into space, or something even more?
No.
No? Are you familiar with the term Vanguard, or the projects in the works for that?
I've heard it a couple times, and isn't the satellite the U.S. plans to launch into space?
Okay, yes, that it is. Okay, that is all. Thank you.
Okay.
And now back to James at the studio.
Thank you, Henry. As you can see, this is a very new-stirred conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, so many citizens are not yet aware of how impactful today's event is to the future of our country. Which, by the way, probably included this bystander. In other leads of this story, some conspirators have gone as far as to say that this surprise launch wasn't actually a surprise at all, but rather, the United States government knew about Sputnik's unfolding developments and wanted to keep it under wraps from the citizens of the U.S. One plausible reason, and I'm just guessing, is because of the fact that the Sputnik was launched on a ballistic missile. The reason this could be a horrifying truth is because of the fact that the Soviet Union has the capability to launch a lethal and weaponized missile over and onto the U.S. Anyway, I'd like to have an opening statement about our next guest interview. Henry will be interviewing a man who is feeling true sorrow after the event of his terrible loss. He is the creator and founding father of the Vanguard. I present to you the chief scientist for the development of America's next future, Dr. Werner von Braun.
Thank you, James. And we're here to interview scientists working on the Vanguard project, Werner Land Vaughn.
No, it's Warner Van Braun.
Whatever you say, Ernan Landon. So, why are you jogging right now anyways?
Because I always jog when I'm stressed.
Why are you stressed?
Because of the Sputnik.
Sputnik?
Yeah.
So they were the first ones into space?
Yeah.
Wait. So that means we weren't.
Yes, correct.
You heard it here first, America. We lost. Back to James at the studio.
Thank you once again, Henry, for that incredibly well-said interview. As you reach the end of the hour, I'd like to take a short time of reflection to review what future this event might create. It might also be important to mention that the event of this race is all relative to the test of which country can launch a man into space and put him on the moon first. After reviewing all the evidence of the situation, I have concluded and formed two options for the future of the U.S. Here they are. This is option 1. Option 1 would be that the U.S. decides to give up on the research for a final frontier and just lets the Soviet Union succeed. This would lead to the eventual downfall of America, whether it be from other countries being more interested in the big, technologically advanced Soviet Union, or from the Soviets becoming more weaponized and more powerful than the US, and maybe even eventually deciding to blow up America. I'd like to sum up in just one quote why this statement kind of seems plausible. Edward Teller, the famous physicist who created the plans for the first hydrogen bomb, has said that this event, and I quote, is a greater defeat for our country than Pearl Harbor. End quote. Honestly, this is a fairly true statement, since Pearl Harbor was one of America's worst setbacks in all of history. It is believable that this one simple event could ruin the United States technologically and lower their standing on the world's podium. This would be the end of option 1. And now we will move on to option 2. Option number 2 is something of imagination and something that seems quite impossible to most people. But in my opinion, I think it's worth taking a shot at. We could say, so what the Soviet Union has got a head start on this race? We could say, so what they have a greater chance of winning in the end? What I think, and probably most of the viewers watching this show right now, is that now should not be a time to weep over the terrible mistake that has happened today, but rather, fight to redefine that mistake and give it a new name. And I personally think that name should be, quote-unquote, a lesson. We can, if we try, beat the Soviet Union and finish this war of science in first place. But the only way we're going to accomplish that is by looking back on this event and questioning what went wrong. So now, let's take another look at that quote from a new angle. Once again, and I quote, straight from the words of Edward Teller, quoting the situation of today. A greater defeat for our country than Pearl Harbor. You know what? I'm gonna take that quote and we're gonna put it in the trash. Yeah. I dare to say to this quote, so what? So what they defeated us? Isn't the American way to break through problems and find solutions to those problems? I personally think so. Even this quote alludes to an example of when America fell down and got back on their feet. And that example is Pearl Harbor. After the events of Pearl Harbor, we went and joined the war and ended up defeating the Japanese, which were exactly the men who committed the terrible crime. Now that I got that statement out of the way, I'd like to wrap up today's newscast. My name is James, and this has been 187 News. Good night, everybody. Make sure you watch out of your windows. Make sure you lock your doors, because maybe one day the Soviets might get you, and communism will spread. Good night, everybody.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket. Here an artist's conception of how the feat was accomplished. A 3-stage rocket. Number 1, the booster, in the class of an intercontinental missile. Its weight estimated at 50 tons. The smaller second stage took over at 5,000 miles an hour and carried on to the highest point reached. 500 miles up, the artificial moon is boosted to a speed counterbalancing the pull of gravity and released. You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite. One of the great scientific feats of the age.